7:30. Let's go. I don't have a hammer, so I can't do anything. I'd like to call a Finance Committee order. Roll call, please.
Alderman Wesley,
Here.
Alderman Police,
Here.
Alderman Luetan, Alderman Sharkey,
Here.
Alderman Cadella,
Here.
Alderman Winger,
Here.
Alderman Coles,
Here.
Alderman Knipe.
I need a motion to approve the minutes, January 22nd, 2009.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Should we go to capital project or should we get the street naming out of the way, the fest naming? Let's do the fest first. In front of you guys, you received a list of names for our fest. It was in your packet. Obviously, they need a name for we can start the advertising for this fest. So does anyone have any idea on what name they want to call this? And let's not spend 2 hours on this. Go ahead, Mr. Cadell.
I was just talking to our manager before the meeting, and he suggested Wally World Family Fun Days.
Okay. Do we have a second on that one?
I'll second that. Sure.
Okay. No, do we?
No.
No, no.
No, don't second.
Okay. Does anyone else
All in
have a
favor?
name they
I
would?
got one.
Aye.
Go ahead. Mr.
Uh,
So,
How about Wooddale Prairie Fest?
Second.
There's a second. Well, this could be quick. So any other names going to be thrown out there? Okay. All in favor to name it Wooddale Prairie Fest?
Aye.
Aye.
Oppose?
Hey.
Okay. Motion carries. Wow. We are done. All right. Next item on the agenda will be the capital project. We'll spend 2 hours on that. Good job. As you know, we put together the capital project for the next 4 or 5 years here. Staff did spend a lot of time on this capital project. We did meet. We did make some concerns that some of the aldermen have. So I'm going to turn it over to Wally first, city manager, to guide us through the first section of this, and then we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Alderman Wesley. I'm going to just give you about 5 or 6 minutes of introductory comments and then turn it over to the chairman, and you can get into the actual projects themselves. For the first time, we've prepared a 5-year capital plan that will plan and guide the capital improvements to be done over the next 5 years. And this is a rolling document. Next year, we'll update it and add a 6th year to it. The following year, we'll update it and add a 7th year to it. And as circumstances may change over the course of time, either because of affordability, projects that need to be moved up or moved back in terms of necessity, the years may change from year to year. And that's really a function of, the economy, the weather, and the potential funding sources. So I want to stress that this is really a planning document, that the only thing that we hope that we set in stone at the end of the night or when you approve the CIP is the first year projects. Everything else is just a planning tool and is subject to change as the years go on. Let's define a capital project. For the purposes of Wooddale, we have defined a capital project as any project in excess of $5,000 with a useful life of over 5 years. It doesn't include routine maintenance, but it's really an improvement in terms of, in a household environment, a roof improvement would be a capital improvement. Painting your family room would be normal routine maintenance and wouldn't be considered a capital project. Vehicles are not included in the CIP. We handle vehicles through the vehicle replacement program, and you're going to see that that doesn't include any money for replacement cars or trucks. This year we've created an additional capital fund. We have still out there the General Capital Improvement Fund, which handles street projects, building projects, miscellaneous projects, and we've added an additional fund, the Water and Sewer Capital Fund. Because we have an enterprise fund, we want to segregate those projects that are unique to the water and sewer system and make sure to the best of our ability we can fund those through water and sewer rates. The General Capital Fund revenues are the 1 cent city-only sales tax that was approved several years ago by referendum, the utility tax, and a transfer each year of $100,000 from the Road and Bridge Fund. The Water and Sewer Capital Fund is predominantly funded through water and sewer rates, although as we get into this, you'll see that we need a 2-year transfusion of funds from the general fund until our water and sewer rates escalate to the point where it's totally self-sustaining. In terms of the preparation of the CIP, it's pretty straightforward. The finance director determines what we have coming in with respect to revenues. The department heads give us a list of the projects that they see as being necessary, and in terms of prioritization, we try to allocate the most important projects to the first couple years, depending upon fundability and depending upon order of magnitude and their priorities, and we try and stretch it out over a 5-year period of time. If I could go to page 5 in your CIP. Page 5 is just a summary of the projects by category. Over the 5-year period, we propose spending about $16.3 million in transportation projects, streets, alleys, stormwater, sidewalks, that kind of thing. We propose $1.5 million in improvements to our buildings and our grounds, $325,000 to miscellaneous projects, and $36.5 million in water and sewer projects. Now, I will note that of that $36 million, $30 million is allocated for an expansion to our sewage treatment plant. We don't know what that number is going to be yet. There's a $30 million plug in the 5th year that we've put in there just for planning purposes. We have not yet identified a funding source for that, but in terms of just planning out, we've thrown that in the 5-year mix. If you go to page 6, which is the cash flow projection for the General Capital Projects Fund, if you go to the first column, fiscal year 2010, we start out next fiscal year with $3.5 million in the bank. This essentially is money that we've collected over the last couple of years from the sales tax and hasn't yet been spent. We see $1.3 million coming in from the utility tax, $2.3 million from the home rule sales tax, $20,000 in interest, $100,000 in a transfer from the Road and Bridge Fund, and then a transfer out to the Water and Sewer Capital Fund of $900,000. That's because the Water Sewer Fund is not yet healthy enough to sustain operations plus the capital projects, and we're going to need to make a 2-year transfer from the General Capital Fund to the Water and Sewer. So we have total available funding the first year of $6.3 million. We anticipate expenses in terms of capital projects of $4.16 million, and at the end of the year, we anticipate having $2.1 million in the bank. If you carry that forward to 2011, we show a utility tax revenue of $1.3 million, home rule sales tax of $2.3 million, a little bit of interest earnings, $100,000 from Road and Bridge, a $700,000 transfer out to the Water and Sewer Capital Fund for total available funding of $5.16 million, $3.87 million in projected expenditures, and at the bottom, an ending cash balance of $1.3 million. And if you carry that forward year by year by year, we can estimate that over 5 years, we propose $18.1 million in expenditures, and at the end of the 5th year, we'll still have $2.37 million to carry forward for future projects. It's a pay-as-you-go plan. We don't anticipate issuing any bonds for any of these projects. We have enough money coming in to be able to pay for them as they come due. And at the end of 5 years, we're still in pretty good financial shape with respect to the cash balance. And if you go to page 7, which is the Water and Sewer Capital Fund, this is a brand-new fund we're setting up, so there's no cash balance at the beginning of next year. We see $600,000 coming in from the Water and Sewer Operating Fund. This is money over and above what we need to operate the water and sewer system. That $900,000 two-time infusion in from the General Capital Fund for a total available funding of $1.5 million, projected expenses of $1.3 million, and a cash balance at the end of next year of $200,000. And then again, year to year to year. At the end of fiscal 2013, we still have about $383,000 in the bank. And then year 2014, when we estimate the sewer plant to come online, that's when the numbers go negative. And we're going to need to make some decisions in the next 2 or 3 years about how we're going to plan and finance that project. It's fairly straightforward. Again, with the exception of the sewer plant expansion, all of the projects in this fund are pay-as-you-go. We have enough money coming in to handle all of those. And that's the recommendation. Last comment, and I want to stress this again, this is only a planning document. The only thing we're asking you to essentially, quote, set in stone by the adoption of the 5-year CIP is the first-year projects. If you adopt the CIP, we'll put the first-year projects in the budget, and then anything else will be subject to affordability, whether projects increasing or decreasing in importance. And again, it'll be a rolling 5-year plan that we update every single year. That basically concludes the introductory comments, Mr. Chairman. I'll answer any questions. If no questions, then I'll turn it over to you for the actual project.
I believe Mr. Nuzio has one question. or
Just a
whatever.
clarification, Wally. You said this is a pay-as-you-go, but the first 2 years in this water sewer fund is in the negative. We're still losing money until we turn this one around.
We're making money on the operations, but we don't have enough money coming in to pay for all the capital projects in years 1 and 2. It's not till year 3 that our revenues get to the point where we can handle all the capital projects.
Any other questions on that?
Mr. Chairman, it's all yours if you want to go through them
Okay.
project by project.
Um,
Before you do, let me just give a tip of the cap to the staff that put all this together. John Kramer and Brad Kittleson handled the transportation, the streets, the water and sewer projects, along with Dave Graff, who handled the engineering side of it. John Forrest was responsible for the building projects on this side of the building. Frank Benowitz was in charge of the building projects on the police side. And Jeff Murmas kept us all sane as we went through this for the first year. And I think they did a good job. And I hope that the council's happy with the draft document that you have.
Okay, let's go on. Obviously, he covers the tab 1 and 2, unless someone's got a question on that. We'll go right to tab number 3 in the book. And that would be transportation summary, the alleys, a bridge, storm sewers, streets, and sidewalks. Anyone have any questions on that? Mr. Nuzio.
Starting with the alleys. Before, we didn't even have these alleys anywhere on the list as far as doing them. Now, we're doing them all in 1 year. When we got a bunch of streets in certain areas that could use some resurfacing or whatnot. How did I'm not in favor of having the alleys as a priority right here in the first year, all in one shot.
and we talked about this at some length at staff, and there's no compelling need to do all of the alleys in the first year. If you want to phase those in over 2 or 3 years, that's perfectly doable. I guess our thought was that if you're going to get in there, let's get in and do them all, get them out of the way. But again, as we've discussed, and Dave and John can expound on this, if you want to phase that in over 2 or 3 years, that's fine as well. We'll just pick out the alleys that are most in need and hit those the first year.
Just, if I can add just a couple of things to that. The alleys are a little bit easier from an engineering standpoint than doing a main street. If, for example, you were to say, gee, why don't we do Elmhurst Street this year? That's in pretty bad shape. That's really a street that needs a year of engineering before we can build it, so it would not be able to be done in time for this year, where I think the alleys we could get done. The other thing is, as you're probably aware, if you've ever driven down the alleys, their condition is much worse than any of our streets by and large. I'm not saying all of them are the same, but certain ones, especially along Irving Park, are in really condition much worse than the streets. They're really beyond something that could be resurfaced at this point. We think we're going to have to put a brand new pavement in there. So, but again, as Wally said, there's no pressing need to do them all in 1 year. I mean, they've been neglected for a while, so we could phase that in any way you choose to do that.
I'll do it. You have a follow-up or?
Dave, if we, when we resurface a street, let's say grind and resurface, let's say we were to take some streets and take some of the alleys out and put in some streets that are pretty rough, that are maybe 4 and 5 years down the road before they even get reconstructed. Is that a lot of engineering or is that pretty cut and dry?
No,
Just grind
for the
and resurface?
resurfacing a mill and overlay, that's pretty basic and does not require a lot of engineering.
Okay, 1 minute. Newsreel did talk to me on this. We did meet the other day about some concerns that some of the aldermen had that I got phone calls on. We talked about, correct me if I'm right or wrong here, we talked about doing half the alleys this year and taking that money and look at the street projects that are so far out, like the Royal Oaks and other areas in the ward that are really bad, to grind the bad areas out and put a temporary, not asphalt, grind it down and put a temporary patch in the area that's bad, not the whole entire street, but give it a fix that we could get by for a couple more years. I suggest that we do it that way, but if the council wants to do it another way, but I'm talking about, it's just not, it's going to have to be, if we look at the worst streets scenario, that streets reconstruction, the way the street plan is going, we look at all the streets and we grind the worst areas out and we do a patchwork. So that was my suggestion, that we take that money and do it that way through the whole city. Mr. Lewitton.
I would like to say bravo to Dave Graff for doing a fine job. I really believe he's hit the nail on the head that the alleys are very important and should be done first, primarily because the alleys are for the majority part in commercial zones. And right now, and he mentioned it right there, he said Irving Park, you have a lot of buildings that are for sale, one right after another, and nobody's going to come in and nobody's going to buy them and nobody's going to develop them because the alleys are crap and they need to be fixed. I think that it's a shame that when you go out of Holy Ghost, you're going on a roller coaster of an alley. I really believe that from an economic development for the city, that your commercial areas have to be taken care of first, because they're the ones that'll create more jobs and more revenue. So you take care of what's needed first to increase the value of the center part of the city. And the alleys are the paramount problem right now. And I think Mr. Groff's decision was a lot of forethought and a very intelligent one, and I don't think we should deviate from his good decisions.
Okay, let's go right down the line, then we'll get it all. Short.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand this now. On page 5, you're talking about water and sewer, 1,300,000 for 2010, and 1,400,000 for 2011. But then you're talking about adding an additional 900,000 to 2010 and 700,000 to 2011. Why do we need to, we're talking about over $2 million then for 2010, and again, way over $2 million for 2011. Why couldn't that be spread out over the next, let's say, 4 years or 5 years before we get to the treatment plant? Why do we have to do that all in 2 years? It looks like, am I wrong? It looks like we're going to be spending $1,300,000 plus 900, so that's $2,200,000 on water and sewer in
No.
2010.
We're going to be spending $1,300,000 in expenditures in 2010. The $900,000 is a transfer from one fund to another to be able to have enough cash flow to be able to spend that $1.3 million. That's a $900,000 that's coming from the general capital fund into the water and sewer capital fund as just a transfer. It's not expenditures, it's just a movement of money so that we have enough. If you go to that, to page 7, we see revenues for this particular fund of $600,000 from the water and sewer operating fund,
Okay,
$2,000 in interest, and a transfer from the other capital fund to the water fund so that we can handle that $1.3 million, and at the end of the year, have a cash balance of $202,000.
so without that transfer, we're saying that we only have $400,000 for 210.
That's correct. If you don't make that transfer, you can't do that $1.3 million in expenditures. You need that transfer to be able to accommodate the $1.3 million in expenditures.
This doesn't show previously, 2009, 2008. What were we spending then on water and sewer?
We didn't have a capital fund to allocate. It was all part of the general, the water and sewer operating fund, and it wasn't broken out into a separate capital fund. And that's what we're trying to do as part of this 5-year plan, is to separate the operations from the capital outlay.
Do you have any idea what we actually spent, though?
Dave, you got an
For instance,
idea?
last year or the year before?
I can
Just
get-
a rough idea.
I'll get that in just a second. I can pull that up for you.
I'm just looking for a rough estimate.
Let me back up here, and maybe I could clarify this a little more for you. In order to make, this is a new fund on page 7 we started. It's in order to make that back to an enterprise fund, knowing that, if I'm mistaken, Brad, help me out here, before we were taking money out of sewer and water fund to do project. Water and sewer fund, when we did the budget in the past several years now, it needs to be self-funded. In order to do this transfer and to get it self-funded by 2012, we going to have to do these two transfers, or else we will not be able to bring that up to balance where it could be self-funded, self-sustained. If you don't want to do that, that's fine, but then we're going to keep coming closer and down, taking that water and sewer fund further in the hole, and we can't get that self-funded.
What, may I follow
Oh,
up?
go ahead.
When we pass the tax, the utility tax, or the phone tax, we were supposed to use that money for a specific thing. And I remember everybody agreeing that once that account was balanced, that we would discontinue that tax.
What?
And I know it doesn't happen very often in
That was
government,
before
but
my time, so I don't know where that money was supposed to go or anything. I'm not familiar with that. I mean, I know there was a utility tax back, but I wasn't sure where that was earmarked or what the deal was on that. I'm sorry, I can't answer that question. Maybe one of them could, but we got all new staff here now, so maybe Christine could bring us up to code, or Joe. Ed? I mean,
Yeah, I tried to find those figures and those amounts. I couldn't even find what year it was, to be honest with you.
Originally, the tax was supposed to be put in for infrastructure only to replace water and sewer lines, and it went astray from there. It was never used for that.
So we use
No,
it
that-
for everything else?
Yeah.
So we just threw it into the general fund? And
We
didn't
used it
do as
in
we
water and
promised.
sewer, but not for infrastructure repair.
Now, are we gonna be able to discontinue that utility tax then, once we, up in 2012, or once we balance that?
I don't anticipate, I expect that to be ongoing. To answer Alderman Shocking's question on how much we spent in the past on water and sewer capital projects, in 2007, we spent $205,000. In 2008, we spent $635,000. In this year's budget, we've got $498,000. And then next year's proposed is $1.3 million, and the following year is $1.45 million.
I take it from that one memo we've gotten with water breaks that we weren't keeping up with what we needed to. I understand that, but to go from 600 to 400 and then jump up to 1,300? No,
600,000 in 2008,
1,500.
498,000 in 2009, and then a recommended 1.3 million in 2010.
I have to look at it some more, thank you.
Mr. Cadell?
I'd like to go back to the alley discussion, if I may.
Go ahead.
I appreciate and in large part agree with Dave Graff's thought process as to why we might want to do those all at one time in the first year, as far as the engineering not being as extensive, and it is something that can be mobilized in a fairly short period of time. And to some extent, I agree with, but certainly understand Alderman Lewitton's point of, these alleys do service a portion of the commercial sector of this city. Let me just respond to that with a couple of things. First, the empty properties in question, from what I know about economic development in the year 2009, I think those properties may have bigger problems than poorly paved alleys. I think they're too small, too shallow, difficult access. I'm not convinced that paving alleys is going to fill those empty storefronts. Furthermore, I want to touch on something that I am pretty sure I remember Dave Graff mentioning at one point in the not-too-distant future. When we talked about the street survey that we had a consultant perform, I guess it's 2 years ago now, I believe, I know it's my opinion, and I'm almost positive I heard you say this too at one time, Dave, the winter directly after that was done took a toll on some roads, on many of the streets, and the conditions documented 2 years ago are likely not, ranking the same percentage. In fact, we might have even had some streets jumping over each other. A street that might have been 82% 2 years ago might have dropped into the mid-70s, whereas one that might have been an 81 might still be there or only slightly lower. I guess where I'm going with this is that we have a 4 or 5 year plan in front of us for streets that this council has approved to reconstruct. And I see quite a few streets in all 4 wards that are deteriorating faster than makes sense with this plan that we've approved. And I'm in favor of maybe cutting back some of the funds in the first year for the alleys, trying to stretch it out a little bit more, and seeing if we can throw more money at slightly more extensive street repairs to get some of these streets to limp along another 5 to 10 years, which may be what we have to do because we don't have the money to completely reconstruct them. rather than hot or cold patches in the potholes, some streets, I know, Ward 1 has, I think, a resident or two here tonight that live on a street that has a pretty significant problem. I know there's streets in my ward, and I know they're in every ward. They might require cutting and, areas to be cut out, and the sub grading perhaps compact a little bit better, and then areas re-blacktop that would be a bit more extensive than we typically think of in annual pothole patching to get these streets to last 5 or 10 more years if that's what need be. So I guess where I'm going with this is I agree with Alderman Police that I'm not 100% sold on doing all these alleys. I also remember a conversation this very council had to not do alleys because we didn't know what the future was of the downtown area that these alleys service. And I don't know if we've all had a change of heart or if the majority have, and that's what we're going to go with, so be it. But I haven't. I still question the viability of doing those alleys at this point. Thank you.
Christine Winger. Joe Coles.
All right. I agree with some of the alleys, especially behind Depot. The alley behind Depot, because I went through the alleys and I was supposed to take Sharky with me, and he wouldn't get up in the morning, but I was. So, so I left at 7 o'clock in the morning and I went around the alleys. The one at Depot, I agree with. That one should be redone. That one is in really bad shape. And the people that live in the apartments on Division Street have to go in that alley, and they give me a call once in a while and say, my car's getting the front end all tore up because I have to go over the holes. That alley should be done. But I think to do them all, now I've went through a lot of the alleys. I went through a lot of the alleys in the industrial center. And as far as I'm concerned, there's only about 2 or 3 that should be done. And I'll agree to that. But to spend $1,200,000 on alleys where there are streets, I know I'm going to have somebody say something, but last Monday I went through all the streets in Royal Oaks. And Royal Oaks is part of people that come in here from, to come in the city of Wooddale. They come in through 83. And the Royal Oaks Drive, I was scared to drive it down with my new car. It was so bad. And I think there's some way we can either patch it up or do something about it. And there are streets that should be done before the alleys. Now, I agree that some of the alleys should be done. I agree that. But especially the one behind Depot, because that one is really bad. And that's the baddest one that I know of. The rest I think they can get away with. The main trouble with the alleys is the garbage trucks that come in there that wreck them. So, but $1.2 million is a lot of money for alleys.
Mike.
Thank you.
Oh, go ahead.
Ladies first, go ahead.
Oh, I didn't know.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I agree that we should not focus on all alleys in one summer. And we need to look at what were even the previous priorities and then get reshuffled for whatever reason. For a while, we were going to look at doing the, behind Georgetown, we were looking at a TIF possibly in those apartments, so we put off doing the streets. And we have Hoover Drive, Park Lane, sitting on here, and now all of a sudden they're 2011. We got to be kidding. We need to make sure that previous priorities still remain in focus, and if we wanted to do an alley or two, fine, but let's keep other priorities going as well, not push them back even further. We were looking at Mill Road potentially to do last year, and now all of a sudden it's on 2012. Forget it. So what we need to do is look at this and put these in priority. And also, as far as Royal Oaks, I do believe that there's a section in this plan that will allow for us to fix those cul-de-sacs within this coming summer. And Do I understand that correct, Mr. Manager, that, or Mr. Graff, that there is a section in here that we haven't gotten to yet, that we're gonna look at those cul-de-sacs as an example?
Well, we did add and I don't remember the number off the top of my head.
We had a storm
Well, we had
drainage study on this capital project. You might not have it in this book, but we added, correct me wrong, 50,000?
right. Well, that's the stormwater part of it. But for the street patching part, we added
On
think it was
14,
TL
2014.
No,
Yeah, 2014.
We added. If I can get to that page. T13 pavement patching preventative maintenance program, $100,000. What I'm thinking of there is significant work. I wouldn't call it Band-Aid. I wouldn't call it temporary, but something less than our usual